This is going to be somewhat of a donor. The most important thing about this car is that it's actually a 91, and the 4-cylinder that I'm going to be converting is a 91. So with that said, the most important thing is that wiring harness that's sitting in there. You can see there's somewhat of a motor in there. I'm going to get into that in a little bit more detail later. So as the parts car comes around the corner here, we'll get this thing in the shop, gonna pull that motor out. The motor's gonna be used, believe it or not, and just take off whatever parts are gonna be required. You know, automatic shift cable, any of the linkages. The rear end we're probably gonna take out of it, and most importantly, the wiring. Got this pile of scrap sitting here inside the shop, nice and warm, you know, letting some of the snow melt off that was on it, and going to be pulling all the parts off that are required for this 4-cylinder to 5-liter swap. So the next part of this video, I've had to film maybe 10 times, just because I've been trying to get my language right so that, you know, I'm not too blunt and I'm not too abrasive, because I am a little disturbed and a little pissed off about this car in general. The reason being is that the car and the motor came from an individual who knows fox bodies and knows that this car and the intent of its parts. Now again, you can't expect the fuel lines to be good on this car. You can't expect, you know, the brakes to be perfect or the suspension or any of that stuff. But when you get a motor, and the motor is pretty clean, where are the accessories? Where are the fuel rails? Where's the injectors? Where's the vacuum lines? Where's the engine harness? You know, there's no cooling system that's in here. You're missing the intake piping for, you know, the air box and all of those other things. There's no exhaust, there's no nothing. And I'm pretty confident that the guy would have had these parts. So I don't know why he wouldn't have, made the buyer aware that all of these components were missing and or needed. Therefore, it could have been more business for him. Now, it's not the end of the world, because I do have some other really good contacts in the area. We're going to be able to find the parts that we need. But that's my little bit of a rant. Nothing can be perfect. I think part of me, as well as I'll admit, is that I would have rather have sourced the parts car out myself for the gentleman, just to know what I'm getting myself into. When he had pretty much already had everything sourced, you know, I just kind of had to take his word for it. So I had to break him the bad news that there's going to be a list of parts that he's going to have to buy. But again, it's a lesson learned for him, a little bit of a lesson learned for me. At the end of the day, he's probably going to end up buying some newer parts, and well, this car is what it is. So that is it, and my rant is over. Now it's time to rip into this thing and take anything off that's of value. So gonna go ahead and plop that motor out. And I'm not kidding you guys, this is how I received the car. I'm gonna go ahead and find some spots to hook onto this motor. It is just sitting on its motor mounts right now in the K-member, nothing too fancy. So gonna go ahead, set up the cherry picker and get this thing plopped out of here. Motor can go on a stand, and you know, I'm just looking at something right now. The timing cover's cracked. Looks like somebody tried to do somewhat of a fix, and who knows what's happened here, if this water pump has actually been replaced or not. But at the end of the day, that needs to get fixed and changed. So that's a little unfortunate. Got the motor out and just about to start picking out all of the wiring harness, and we'll take out probably things like the speedo cable, throttle cable, kickdown cable. Hopefully kickdown cable's in there. Anything that's going to be of potential value for the swap. I think this car was pretty stock and unmolested because it still has the air silencer in the inner fender here, and you know, the car wasn't automatic, so probably wasn't a race car by any means. But once we pull out all the wiring harness from the bay here, be able to put the car up in the air. Definitely going to take the sway bar and have it on hand, since I have a huge shortage of sway bars from the, it's like every Mustang that I've bought didn't come with a sway bar. I'm going to look at the brake booster a little bit more closely, see if that's salvageable. You know, it's a little scabby, but if it's nothing too bad, then it's not too much just to scuff that down and give it a fresh coat of paint. You can see our motor sitting here back on the stand, and you know, I went ahead and set the intakes back on the top of the motor. You know, couldn't see that that timing cover was cracked when the thermostat housing was sitting on top of it. So not too sure if maybe that was strategically placed on there so that somebody couldn't see that. But yeah, that's a little bit of an unfortunate thing to come across. The motor mounts are pretty much non-existent, so surprised that this was even in a car, to be honest. But anyways, these are going to be getting changed. The oil pan actually doesn't look too bad, so whether the gasket's been changed at some point, who knows, but we'll be pulling the pan off. We'll get it cleaned up and painted. Amazing. This is like living in a penthouse and having wall-to-wall windows of being able to see things. So yeah, this is your definition of a rotted frame rail. Oh, horrible. And the driver's side is no better. Definitely be able to get a better look at that once all the wiring harness is pulled out. Anyways, gonna start tackling this, and be one step closer to getting this eyesore out of the shop here. So the important connector, and why I kept stressing about this car being a 91 and the 4-cylinder that we're going to convert being a 91, is actually this connector right here. And this is where the computer's main harness plugs into the car's harness. So to be able to send information that goes to your gauge cluster, so on and so forth. This is going to be an extremely important harness in terms of the conversion that we're going to be doing. So we'll get this all disconnected, and let's move on to that passenger side kick panel so we can get that side of the harness out. So you can see down here, the computer has already been removed from the car. So this is underneath the kick panel. We're gonna have to disconnect this guy, so these two, and there's a ground that's hiding down here. So we're gonna go ahead and disconnect this ground wire. Here is the green connector, the gray connector, also your ground wire. Once you have those guys out, you'll have enough room. So be patient, take your time. And boom, she's out. So a couple glove casualties later, and we have the wiring harness out, got the steering column out, and I did go ahead and pull out that brake booster. So it's really not that difficult. You know, people always complain because those are the main bolts usually that you need to get out when you're doing the 5-speed swap and the pedals. But once you drop that column, your life is super easy. So for the 10 minutes it'll take you to drop your steering column out, always recommend that you do it just to make your life that much easier whenever you're dealing with pedal assembly or brake boosters or any of that. Found out that the O2 harness was all cut up. The harness is there, but where it actually goes to the oxygen sensor connectors, they've just been cut, which also includes the low oil sending unit wire. Again, a little unfortunate, but when you're dealing with parts cars and stuff like that, these cars are so old now, things have been cut, things have been spliced into, and overall this harness is actually in really good condition, so I'm not going to complain about that. So let's go ahead, get the hoist arms underneath this thing, get it up in the air. So if you guys have ever heard the term rusting, this is definitely the definition. So floorboards rotted, there's our carpet right underneath there sticking out, and just everything is super scabby and scaly. Like, look at the dust shields on the insides of the rotors here. Like, things are spinning, and it's not locked up or anything, but I don't even think I'm gonna bother with any of these caliper, cores, struts, any of that stuff. I've got some other stuff that came off the lemon drop car that's in way better condition than this. So, you know, it's not even worth trying to get these front springs or any of that. I'm even skeptical about taking out this rear diff, but you know, a little bit of elbow grease, you can get this scale off and it can get cleaned up. Probably, in fact, might even just cut the control arms. Might be easier than trying to fight these bolts out. Cut the brake lines off and yeah, drop that out. Gonna try and get this drive shaft out right now. Hopefully these bolts aren't too bad. We'll see. Might have to heat those up as well. But yeah, there's not much that is salvageable under here. Yeah, I don't know who in their right mind would have thought that anything on this car would have been good to use other than the wiring harness. Coil springs are snapped. Everything is rotted. Here we are, probably 4 hours spent, maybe a little bit more actually. I gotta say, I've stripped a lot more in a lot less time, and there is nothing worse than stripping down a rusty car. I have my hoodie off because I was taking that sway bar off earlier and I was getting a rust shower. It was just coming down in my hoodie, down the back of my neck. I can't say how much I hate rust. So that marks the end of this scrap slash parts car. Got everything off that we needed to, and now she's gonna go off to the scrap yard and get crushed for real. And a little bit of an end to the nightmare in the beginning is over, so excited to move forward. I actually already managed to find another complete engine, pan, the intake with all the wiring, the injectors, everything that's needed, so not gonna have to deal with this guy over here that was in the car. Sayonara to that guy. And the other motor actually came with a full AOD transmission and everything. Hopefully that's getting dropped off tomorrow. And the guy who sourced it is actually gonna take this one, as this is gonna suit his needs better, and the stockish Panda intake motor will suit the needs of the 4-cylinder conversion. Plus, we got the rear end sitting here. We got, you know, 610 holes and a couple other little odds and ends that are of benefit. You know, the throttle cable's gonna be unique. Got the cruise control cable and a couple other little things that'll be useful during the swap. So that's it, guys. Gonna get the car delivered here. That's actually gonna get the conversion probably in the next week. And then we'll be able to dive full bore into that, get the motor transmission out, clean up the engine bay, paint it up, get the wiring harness prepped, everything else. The other motor and transmission will be here. So I'm hoping to have this thing up and running in no time. And from there, we can focus on some of the suspension and braking components that'll be required as well to make sure that this 4-cylinder to V8 swap is done properly. So while I was inside trying to wrap things up for this video, you know, I figure Dale would just take the car, set it on the trailer and be done with it. Well, he took it upon himself to turn it into a convertible. Guess he was taking out all of his Chevy angers and frustrations on this poor little fox body here. So it crushed up pretty good, and this thing is now ready to go to the scrap yard and go up to fox body heaven. It's bittersweet, you know. You never want to see a fox body get crushed or get sent off like that, but at the same time, this thing was way far gone. There was no saving this car. You can see right through that frame rail. It is unbelievable the amount of rust and rot on this car. But you know what? She managed to donate a few good parts for this swap, so be sure to stay tuned for more. Thank you again for subscribing, for following. If you're not subscribed, make sure you hit that button. And I really appreciate that if you got some fox body friends, share my content and the channel along with them. Really want to grow it for 2021 and get some really good exposure, get some memberships going, get some swag going that I can get out to you guys, so on and so forth. So until next time, we'll see you soon.